are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is March 16th, 2025, and this is another episode of Lighthearted Lite, where we listen to edited versions of interviews from the past 6 years. Today's conversation was first heard in episode 60, about 5 years ago. The guest is Dave Waller, the owner of Graves Lite in Boston Harbor. This is part one of 2 parts. The second part will be posted 2 weeks from now. The ledges in outer Boston Harbor, called the Graves, about 10 acres in all, have been home to a lighthouse since 1905. The 113-foot tower is made of granite, and a first-order Fresnel lens was installed in the lantern. The tower was home to male lighthouse service keepers and later Coast Guard keepers. The light was automated in 1976, and the keepers were reassigned. Weather and vandalism took their toll. The old walkway that led to the oil house was destroyed by storms, and vandals caused thousands of dollars in damage. The fog signal house was swept away by the perfect storm of October 1991. Under the guidelines of the National Historic Lighthouse Preservation Act, the lighthouse was sold in a government auction in September 2013 to businessman David Waller. The selling price was $933,888, more than twice the highest amount previously paid for a lighthouse at auction. Another partner for the preservation of Graves Lite is the well-known Boston philanthropist Bobby Sager. Dave Waller owns a video special effects company headquartered on Newbury Street in Boston, and he also collects and restores old neon signs. He and his wife, Lynn, a graphic designer, live in a restored fire station in the Boston suburb of Malden, and that's actually where we recorded this interview. So let's listen to part one of my conversation with Dave Waller now. Were lighthouses an interest of yours before you discovered that Graves Lite was up for sale?
No, they weren't at all. I've been thinking about lighthouses a lot, as you can imagine. And I think they don't have a lot of enemies. You know, some people hate dogs. Some people hate kids. But nobody seems to hate lighthouses. They either love them and they have lighthouse scarves and coffee mugs and things like that, or they just like them and they kind of move on with their lives. I think I was one of those people that just liked them and moved on with my life.
And how did you find out that Graves Lite was up for auction?
A friend of mine from Chicago actually texted me with the classic, "Hey, Dave, you should go and buy this," and sent me the listing for it right after it had been announced. And at the time, I think the minimum bid was something like $10,000 or something. And I was like, wait, I could just put that on an Amex card and then I could go look at it for free because they were having tours, but you had to be a registered bidder. But you get your money refunded. So I was like, okay. So Lynn was out of town, and I just signed up, and I just wanted to go inside and check it out. No interest in buying it. But getting closer and closer, it just got cooler and cooler. And it was pretty scary because it was all completely covered with soot on the outside and nasty on the inside, just peeling paint, and everything was boarded up, and it was wet and disgusting. And we got to the top floor and opened it up in the watch deck room, and then I looked out and I was like, wow, I was born over there, I work there, I live right there. I couldn't believe the vantage point that Graves has at the beginning of the harbor. And the woman, Barbara, who was running the auction, she said, look, I'm not trying to sell this thing because it's going to sell itself. She said, but I've looked at the list of lighthouses that are coming up for sale, and I know what I've sold already. And she goes, I don't think there's a better lighthouse in the entire inventory that's so close to a major metropolitan city that would be offered to the public. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, this is an opportunity here.
Lynn, were you in agreement right from the start that owning a lighthouse was a good idea? I don't know if that's a good question for me to ask, but...
Well, like he said, I was out of town when he first got the news about it. And he texted me where I was on vacation with my family, and he said, "How is it okay if I buy a lighthouse, or if we buy a lighthouse?" And I was like, haha, sure. And he took that as fine, and he proceeded on, and I kind of thought he was joking. But yeah, no, it's been great, and he certainly is the driving force behind it. I'm the support guy, but yeah, it's been wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you're being modest.
She is.
Yeah. So during the GSA auction of Graves Light, the price was driven up by the fact that it became kind of a bidding war between you and Bobby Sager.
Right.
Bobby is a well-known Boston philanthropist. He's chairman of Polaroid. He's a great photographer. Is he still chairman of Polaroid?
No, he sold it.
He did, okay.
Yep.
And he owns 3 other lighthouses, including mine at Ledge Light, just south of Boston Harbor. I met with him a couple of years ago. He's a very interesting guy. Even though you had that bidding war with him, I understand you've become friends.
Absolutely.
And he was quoted in one article as saying that lighthouses are, quote, small spaces where big conversations can happen, unquote. You want to say a little bit more about Bobby Sager?
He's a very interesting person, and he does not fit into any category. I can safely say that about him. I, at first, didn't know who I was bidding against when the auction was going, of course. And then about a couple days later, we were in the Boston Globe, and then we got a FedEx the next day from him to buy the lighthouse from us at a profit. He said he'd pay us over the price that we had paid. And at first, it seemed like it might be a nice way to just walk away with some cash and never really put much effort into it. But we were really getting excited about the lighthouse at that point. And so we put him off and said, thanks, but no thanks. We met him. And
I have to interrupt you.
What?
You did not consider it at all. When you got that FedEx package, you were like, no way. We just got it. We haven't even played with it yet.
Yeah.
Not selling that lighthouse.
I guess so, yeah. And then a couple of years later, he just kept bouncing back into our lives and asked if we wanted to sell it And I said, no. I said, look, if you really want to buy a lighthouse so bad, mine at Lite is for sale. Go buy that one. Thinking that he would just go away. So he did buy it. And he still came back to us again. And he came up, he's a business guy, and he came up with a great plan about how he said he's got a lot of money and this place is going to take a ton of money to fix up. He doesn't know how to fix up lighthouses, but he said, you apparently do. He said, so that's a partnership, right? And I said, yeah, I guess you're right. So we split it with him. He takes it a week and then we take it a week. And truthfully, neither of us really go out there much just to relax. I go out there all the time to work, and he goes out there once in a while. But it's been great. It's been a really good relationship.
So you took possession of the lighthouse in 2013, and what was the first thing you had to do when you actually took ownership?
The first thing I had to do was scare both of my boys to death by taking them out there camping and pushing all the paint chips to the side and putting sleeping bags out there during a gale, and made them never want to go there again. But we had to kind of assess where all the water was coming in from, because it doesn't matter what you do with a lighthouse if you can't keep the water out. And so we had a masonry restoration specialist and a structural engineer out, because we figured, why start anything until you can just do that? Since we had bought it in the fall, there wasn't much that we could do weather-wise before the weather sets in. So it was mostly just planning. So we took careful measurements and photographs of every floor. We went down to the National Archives and we got the original plans and the keeper's logs and all the stuff from Candace, who, God bless her, we miss her so much. What a wonderful lady, and so generous with her time and so knowledgeable. The stuff that she found for us that really helped us in the planning stages in the wintertime, so that in the spring we had a game plan of how we were going to attack the place.
Yeah, you're talking about J. Candace Clifford, the late Candace Clifford, who was a fantastic researcher who knew the holdings of the National Archives, the lighthouse-related holdings of the National Archives inside and out better than anybody else did. You accomplished a lot in the year 2014. You did all kinds of stuff in that year. Can you tell us about the replacement of the lantern glass, one of the things that you did that year?
Yeah, that was actually a disaster. We thought we would take the lantern glass out of the entire lantern and reglaze it and then put it back. And we wound up, because there were a few cracked pieces of glass, and we wound up cracking a few more. We even got a glass guy out there, and we just couldn't deal with it. So we wound up just sealing it. The cracks we sealed with super glue. It's so lightweight that it just gets sucked right into the cracks and seals them. Because I was out there in a gale one time, and even a crack in the glass, you'll see water just spitting out from a crack that you wouldn't think that it would leak water at all. We basically gave the entire lantern a lick and a promise instead of a full restoration, and it holds water, so I guess it doesn't really matter as long as it keeps the water out.
It's one of the most beautiful lanterns, I think, of any lighthouse, those diamond-shaped panes.
Yeah, and it's one of the last that was built, and that's how you can tell a newer lighthouse by those diagonal panes. I think it was sort of a more recent invention, if I'm not mistaken.
Ram Island Ledge Light in Maine is exactly the same. And Bob, isn't Rockland Breakwater?
It is. It's a smaller version of the lantern, but it is the same type of curved glass and diagonal frames.
Yeah. We
in the documents that Candace had uncovered, we learned that lantern was cast in a foundry in Milwaukee, and they were having all kinds of problems casting it, the first order lantern. And so they had to send the guys from Boston by train out to Milwaukee just to kick a little butt and kind of make things happen. But we do have a photograph of it in the foundry, completely assembled, unpainted. It just looks gorgeous.
Right. I think I've seen that.
Yeah.
Also in the summer of 2014, you did some restoration of the weathered stone near the base of the tower, which is it's phenomenal that you're able to have that done. How was that done exactly?
Most of the cracks in the lighthouse were superficial, but the engineer had noticed that the lighthouse has twisted over time, and there are helical cracks in some of the blocks. And they said that that's sort of typical. It's not settling. It's more the forces of nature against it that has twisted it, almost like an ice cream cone gets twisted. So some of the cracks were fine, and we just patched them up. And then other ones had resulted in pieces of granite breaking off, maybe about the size of a loaf of bread or maybe a little bigger. And we found one of them in the surf and cleaned it and put it back, but the other ones were missing. So we went up to Rockport, which is the quarry where all the granite was quarried back in 1902.
That's Rockport, Massachusetts, as opposed to Rockport, Maine.
Yes. And we were able to find a couple pieces of granite just kicking around in the parking lot, and we lifted them, put them in the car, and we cut them to the right shape and then put them in so that they'd be the right match. Mm-hmm. And we learned from the history of the lighthouse that when they quarried it, part of the requirements that the government had was that every 4 or 5 courses, they were to cut an extra block that was oversized in case they had cracked a block in transit or in setting them. They would have some that was exactly the same color as the part of the quarry so that they didn't take and put a replacement block in that was too bright or too dark. I mean, that's how much they cared about these things when they built them.
I remember that same year, 2014, I went near Graves Lighthouse in a boat just after you had it pressure washed.
Oh, yeah.
And I just couldn't stop raving about how beautiful it looked. It looked like it had just been built. You know, and it's a lighthouse I'd been looking at for so many years. It must have been so rewarding for you that year to just kind of sit back and see the progress that was being made.
Well, we had really had to point all the stonework to keep the water out. And in doing that, they needed to acid wash the stone rather, so that the mortar would stick to it. And what it resulted in was a giant patchwork of these clean mortar joints and then all the soot from 100 years of steamships passing by and pollution. I liked the nasty look, the sort of, we'll call it the Minot's Ledge look, but you can't have both. So we realized we really had to clean it. I didn't want to clean it because I just thought it looked kind of angry and forbidding. But I'll tell you, I agree with you. Once it was clean, it looked dynamite. It really did. It was so bright white. Yeah. Much whiter than I thought.
Yeah. I couldn't believe how bright it was.
Yeah.
Also in 2014, you had replacement windows installed. And I believe you had some stuff that was filmed for This Old House.
Yes.
You also had the commercial made about the replacement windows.
Oh, the Harvey window commercial, yeah.
Yeah.
That was fun.
That was, and I don't know if it's still being shown, but that commercial was, they got years of mileage out of that commercial.
Yeah, I called them and said they should make a new one instead of showing the old one. But I haven't yet.
Yeah,
but that was a lot of fun.
How did that work? You had some kind of a deal for that commercial.
They had tried to contact the Coast Guard to shoot at a lighthouse, and the Coast Guard didn't want to engage for probably lots of reasons. And then somebody just realized that I had bought a lighthouse with Lynn, so they asked me, and I'm like, sure, why not? So they came out, filmed for a day. It was fun. The windows, though, were a challenge because they obviously have to hold back not just the normal rain, but being an offshore light, they have to be super strong. So our brother-in-law, Carl, made them out of Nantucket. And thank goodness the Coast Guard had saved some of the original sashes and put them away. And they were in the first floor of the lighthouse. And we were able to replicate the original sashes because in the 70s they'd taken them all out and put glass blocks in.
And how are those windows doing?
They're fine, but they need upkeep every single year. We have to strip them and revarnish them. It's basically a boat that doesn't move.
So you've replaced windows, obviously, wooden doors and trim also, I think in the...
Well, this is the strange thing about this place, right? Because when we got there was very little inside. They had completely
Right. I remember. I was in there back in 2001 when there was very little in there.
But there was one door inside, and there was one banister railing, and there was one windowsill. And we were able to replicate all of the things that were missing because there was still one of them left, which was neat. And the things that weren't left, we had acquired that full set of plans from the Coast Guard, and everything was drawn out. The kitchen cabinets, the ceiling paneling details, everything. So we were able to build from scratch what was completely missing. So we built a new keeper's cabinet for all the oil wicks and lamps and so forth, which is absolutely spectacular. My cousin built that for us. And the thing that I'm so thrilled about is how many hands have touched this place. And, it's not fair to give us all the credit here because so many people, so many talented people have touched this place from all over New England and New York in terms of glass makers and foundry casters and wood carvers and stonemasons and weavers, and the list goes on and on and on. And these are all not big companies. These are small individual people or very, very small companies. And that's the way it was built the first time, too.
I saw, I was going through your blog on your website, which, is the source of a lot of my questions here, kind of reminded me of all you've accomplished there. And one of the things I came across that I kind of had forgotten about, the amazing story that a diver found a doorknob from the lighthouse on the bottom of the harbor.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Isn't that fun? We didn't know what the doorknobs were like because they weren't in any of the plans. And, I suppose it's not the end of the world to not know what the doorknobs were like. But when someone hands you a doorknob that he found in the cove, you feel like it probably didn't come from anywhere but graves, right? I mean, doorknobs don't migrate, as best I know. And so I was able to buy some antique doorknobs that matched it. It was kind of a simple white porcelain doorknob. Mm-hmm. But, hey, who would know? And somebody else found a coat hook in the cove as well, a brass coat hook. So I know what the style of that is. I was able to find some antique ones online. So anytime we can find something to match it, we do. But it's not a museum. And we keep reminding ourselves that. It's our home where we can go and hang out. And so there are several things that are completely not authentic at all, but look like they might just fit. Like, for instance, there's a bathroom. Mm-hmm. And they did not have a bathroom. They had a metal bucket. And that's what they used as a toilet. And they didn't bathe unless they jumped in the ocean. They washed all of their dishes with salt water from the ocean, and they had a cistern for fresh water, but they lived very simply, and we thought we'd kind of step it up a little bit. So we've got a fridge.
Yeah, that's understandable. What's the situation with electricity in the tower?
So the Coast Guard equipment's all their own system. They have their own solar panels and batteries and all that. And that runs, they come out a couple times a year just to maintain that. And they have a key, and they call us when they're coming just to make sure we're not, taking a shower or something. And one of the things we wanted to do out at Graves was to not use as much petroleum as we could, because it just seemed like it's such a beautiful sanctuary for animals, and we're just obviously running this planet down to the ground anyway. So we bought some solar panels and put them on the shed roof on the dock, and just got them on Amazon.com. Got 10 of them, and we wired them up to some marine batteries, and that makes all the power for the place. So all the lights are 24 volts DC. The water maker runs on DC power, and we just use marine equipment wherever we could because everything seems to rust out there if it's not marine rated. And I'll tell you something, those solar panels make all the power that we need. It's wonderful.
No wind power.
We do have a wind generator, a small one that we haven't hooked up yet. And it's in a couple boxes. We just haven't gotten around to it yet. But there's always wind out there, it seems. And the closer you are to the tower, the more wind there is because the tower blocks the wind and then compresses the air. So it's much windier right at the tower than it is 20 feet away from the tower.
Graves Lighthouse is like an old friend to me. I lived in Winthrop, Massachusetts with a view of the lighthouse for almost 15 years. I visited Graves Light in June 2001 by helicopter while it was being converted to solar power. I will never forget how the pilot, Dale Hardy, landed the helicopter. We were flying in without hesitation on a platform on the side of the lighthouse tower. It was pretty memorable. And then, of course, we climbed up the 30-foot ladder up the side of the tower. On the way back, we hovered near Boston Light, America's oldest light station, where I took a photo that was later used on the cover of one of my books. The second part of this interview will be posted in 2 weeks. One of the things we talk about in the second part is the incredible first-order Fresnel lens that Dave Waller has built from spare parts. The lens is now installed in the lantern room of the lighthouse. I got to be there in August 2023 on the day that some of the heavy components for the base of the lens were lifted by helicopter to the top of the lighthouse, which was completely amazing. The Coast Guard has given the green light to the lighting of the lens as an aid to navigation, but it's been delayed a few times. Hopefully it'll happen soon. Be sure to check out uslhs.org to learn more about the U.S. Lighthouse Society. Please consider helping to preserve our lighthouses and their history by becoming a member or making a donation to the Society. We will be back with a new full episode of Lighthearted next Sunday, and the guest will be Florida Lighthouse historian Neil Hurley. And then the following week, part 2 of my interview with Dave Waller will be coming up. Until then, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and keep a good light.